sometimes I would get like anxious, overwhelmed if I feel like I have a lot of things to do, and then I would write it out and be like, it's like 3 things and it's not going to take me that long, So it's like, okay, my mind's being a little dramatic here. So like, whether it's just like you have a lot to do or more like extreme situations, I think definitely journaling and just trying to get out of your head is like a good first step, at least.
Hello and welcome to Cham Chats. Here we talk about self-discovery and finding true happiness within. I'm Leanne, and today Matthew and I sat down to talk about anxiety, something we both have experience with and know that many people struggle with as well. We talked about how this meditation method helped us to address the source of our anxieties so that we could ultimately be free of them, and we offer some tips and ideas of what you can do to start managing and eliminating your anxiety as well. We hope you enjoy this episode of Cham Chats. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good.
So what are we talking about today?
I don't know. I'm scared to say. I'm having a little anxiety.
You don't say.
Yes, we're here today to talk about something very near and dear to my heart. I don't know about yours, but anxiety.
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely something I have struggled with.
Yes, I'm familiar. A lot of my family is familiar. Does anxiety run in your family?
I mean, I don't know quite the extent of it. I know from just knowing it, my dad, I'm sure he has like anxiety and, doesn't like, that public speaking or a lot of the other stuff. So It's kind of similar personality to me. So I'm sure, he does.
It's interesting because some amount of anxiety is totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think public speaking is one of those things where it's pretty common, but maybe to a certain extent, I don't know, what your dad or
right.
how you guys handle public speaking, but there's a normal amount of anxiety that most people feel in certain circumstances. And then there's the other end of people like me. Sometimes. Actually, I might not be as bad as I think I am, but where it's just like an excessive amount for no good reason, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely there's a normal reaction of anxiety to doing something new or public speaking or whatever it is. But then I think when it's kind of persistent and ongoing and, having anxiety days up to doing something, then I think that's, something that I'd probably good to look at, but to seek ways, I think, to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if it's paralyzing from actually being able to do something or being able to enjoy doing something, then it's a real problem.
Yeah, when it really interrupts your daily life or daily activities,
So what is anxiety? Let's start there. Well, according to my Google search, my official Google search, it can be an intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations, or a feeling of fear, dread, and uneasiness. You said you had a definition or a good example of what it feels like?
It was more of I was thinking of kind of my own experiences in dealing with anxiety, because for me it was a lot of social anxiety and interacting with people. So for me, I was thinking about, I was anxiety almost feels like it's like you're in a room that's on fire, but you're the only one who could see the fire. And so it's in some sense for me, especially with social anxiety, can feel kind of isolating because it's the room's on fire. Can we get out? But it seems like everybody else is fine. But
that's interesting.
So that's kind of what I thought of.
I thought of two things when you said that. One is the meme with the dog in the house.
Yes, I thought of that too.
And then I just thought of a time when I was with a group of friends, and we were I don't know, just hanging out, whatever, laughing, having a good time. And then I was in the middle of laughing about something, and then I started to have this kind of felt like an out of body experience where I was on the outside looking in, and whatever I was laughing at wasn't funny anymore. It just felt very artificial, and And I was still laughing, but in my head, I was just like, why am I laughing? Like, I don't know. It was the weirdest feeling. I just felt very disconnected from like what was happening. And I don't know. That was probably somewhere around like the height of my anxiety and depression, where I was just feeling like really disconnected from everyone and everything. And it just felt like I couldn't really be there. Like I couldn't really enjoy that moment. And then it wasn't funny anymore.
Right, yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it wasn't funny at all to begin with. But it was an odd sensation. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have moments like that where this might not be necessarily related to anxiety, but just kind of being around people or places, and I'm like, why am I here? Like, do I really want to be here? Or is it just like something, I guess kind of having anxiety of like, like missing out on things or feeling left out. It's like, it kind of drove me to like, I think like, hang out with people or do things, and I'm like, eventually I was like, do I really want to be here? So, yeah.
When you say, do you really want to be there? Did anxiety push you to be there when you didn't really want to be there? Or did anxiety make you want to leave even though you wanted to be there to be social, but you were too anxious about it?
I feel like sometimes it could be a little of both, but I guess it kind of be related to two different things. I think definitely the second one of like, I like wanted to come here, but now that I'm here, it's like I kind of feel a little anxious or overwhelmed about it. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of that, because I think in my head, like, used to kind of like picture myself being more outgoing or more social or more like whatever, but it's like when you're actually in the situations and it's maybe like an opportunity to do it, it's like you're too anxious to actually like do it. Or it's I guess anxiety kind of in a way kind of keeps me from like being more like expressive and being myself, because it's like, again, with social anxiety, it's like always kind of like worried about like what people are thinking or judgments or stuff like that. So
yeah. I get that. So there's a book called Don't Feed the Monkey Mind. Let me make sure that's the title of the book before. Yes, it's called Don't Feed the Monkey Mind. I swear I read it.
Like, what part of the podcast, what part are we cutting out?
No, we can leave it. This is written by Jennifer Shannon, who is a therapist who specializes in treating anxiety disorders. This book was recommended to me by a therapist that I had at one point, and it was a very good book. I do recommend it. It definitely helped me understand a lot more what was happening inside my brain and to my body on a physical level, and it made me feel a little better about how common, I guess, what I was experiencing was, because when you're feeling that, you kind of feel like isolated and like I'm crazy and nobody understands. Right. And then you read something and you're like, oh wait, no, other people experience this too.
Yeah.
So
if, like, from our perspective, it seems like everybody else is totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. So this not only made me feel a little bit more normal, but it also explained in a very logical way what was happening. So one thing that it said, and there's a lot of important information that I'm not going to read, because then at that point I'm just going to read you the entire book. But so in general, we cannot relax and be at peace unless we feel safe. So when there's a perception of a threat, what happens is the amygdala sets off an alarm system that alerts the hypothalamus and the adrenal glands, which then send hormonal and neurological signals to the sympathetic nervous system, which is what makes your heart rate accelerate and your breathing, and then stress hormones, and shuts down digestion and other necessary functions, which she says is basically you're in survival mode at that point. So that made a lot of sense to me, because when I would get anxious, I couldn't focus on anything else, and eating is one of the things that I could not do. That's like if somebody like broke into your house and you're like hiding in a closet and trying to eat a burger at the same time. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, that's not on your list of priorities.
It's probably not going to help you with your survival.
So like, okay, that makes sense. Like, what's happening too. So, that's
right. Yeah, it kind of sounds like it's essentially that, like, the fight or flight response.
Yes, definitely.
But I think, like, obviously, like, back when before like this, maybe like the Stone Age, or like, we didn't have all this technology, that flight or fight was, obviously important to keep us alive. But like now it's like we have so many comforts, and we don't need to be in that survival mode 24/7, nowadays. But, the issue is that our brain still makes, I think, like situations and maybe like everyday things or interactions or whatever, like it kind of puts ourselves in that space.
Yeah. Similarly, she also talks about how we genetically we sense social threats too, because I guess like back in the day we like needed each other to survive. Like we had to stay in packs of people,
right?
And if you sensed that somebody didn't like you, or that like you were being excluded from the group or whatever, the tribe, then like you were at danger because people weren't going to be there to protect you. Right. So like somewhere deep in our DNA, that's a fear we have, which contributes to social anxiety and like being on a subconscious level or unconscious level, why we're afraid of not being accepted or something like that.
Yeah, makes sense. This is probably also why we get like certain vibes from certain people. We can kind of like sense things even if we don't know why.
Yeah. We're all psychic. And then the last thing I kind of want to say about this is when our minds are being taken over by anxiety, we make two mistakes. And the first one is that we overestimate the threat, because the actual odds of something horrible happening is very slim, usually, and unless something actually terrible is happening. And then the second mistake is that we underestimate our ability to cope with the negative emotions that are associated with what's happening and with the threat should it actually occur. So if something does happen, we assume we're going to die.
Right.
And that's it. Or that whatever negative emotions come up in the situation, we're not going to be able to handle it. And that's a big one for me, too. But.
Oftentimes when we're having anxiety, our minds tend to go to like worst case scenario and just like, it's usually never going to be that bad.
Yeah. So do you want to share like some of your experience with anxiety or?
Sure. I mean, we kind of already touched on it. Like I said, like social anxiety was always a big thing for me. So just like sometimes just having like a normal conversation with somebody was like very difficult for me. Like even like that, whether if you ever have to do like group projects or, talk in front of people in class, stuff like that was always like most like nerve-wracking thing, and just a lot of anxiety. And I think just generally like because I had a struggle lives with like purpose and like not knowing what I want to do with my life, so it's like just a lot of anxiety of like, what do I do with myself? Right? Or like if I decide to do something, like is this the right decision? So it's like a lot of like overthinking about stuff. And I think a lot of that anxiety too with social anxiety is, again, it's like always like thinking about like how other people are like perceiving me. It was very paralyzing. And how about you? What was your experience with like anxiety?
I definitely have those kind of similar thoughts about or had about what people are thinking about. No, you know what? I still have them sometimes. Let's be honest.
It's not totally gone, but it is much better.
It was, definitely. It was a lot worse before, but I still think about what other people think about me, but I don't get anxious about it like I used to.
Right.
Like, no, most of my anxiety though, it was always relationship relationship involved. It was always revolved around relationship. It's particularly, not actually the relationship, the idea of breaking up was like a huge trigger for me. Right.
I mean, I think that's probably a trigger for a lot of people. It's like having those hard conversations.
Well, I took it a step further though. I think because from talking to people, there is one friend who actually I think she kind of experienced a similar thing, but not many other people fully understood like why I was freaking out so much. But it wasn't the breakup, although that gave me anxiety too, but it was the idea that one day we might break up would scare. At one point, it was like there would reach a point where I guess the relationship was serious enough where I knew it would hurt if we broke up.
Right.
And that idea freaked me out so much that I was like, it was a weird domino effect of like, if I had any sort of doubt in my mind, then I'd be like, oh my God, I gotta pull the plug. I can't let this go any further.
Right.
I'm gonna hurt myself. I'm gonna hurt the other person. The longer I stay in this, the more it's gonna hurt. And I cannot bear to deal with this. So I gotta pull the trigger now.
Right.
And I would do that. I did it a few times. I like preemptively broke up with someone just because I was having anxiety about it. Because I thought anxiety meant that I had to take action. Like, I thought I was having like crazy intuition or something like that. That like, my intuition is telling me that this is going to go south, so I need to pull the trigger now. But in reality, that wasn't really true. I mean, like, yes, they didn't work out, but not for that reason. Like, they just didn't work out. Right.
Yeah, it sounds like it's basically we get that fear, right? Because that's like the base sort of emotion.
Yeah.
And so, I think we, kind of latched onto that idea, and then, it's kind of hard sometimes not to go down that rabbit hole.
And then when I felt that enough times in my life, I started to have anxiety about having anxiety.
Yes.
And so that was where this author that I just mentioned, whose name I now forget, Jennifer Shannon?
Yeah, I think that was it.
She made a good analogy. She said it's like an IV drip of fear. And I totally know what that felt like, because at a point it was like, I used to compare it actually to as like a cloud that would just follow me around.
Right.
And it wasn't always raining, but it was there. Right. It was just waiting to pounce, basically. Right. So I just felt it like hovering over me everywhere I went. And it was like just a fear of, when is it coming? Like, when am I going to feel it again?
Right.
Yeah,
I think I kind of had similar experiences like that. Just kind of made me think about it. I was like, I used to have anxiety about like not having anxiety. Like, like I feel like I should be anxious about something, but I'm not. So I got anxious about not being anxious. So, it's just like, I don't know, that's something when you're kind of dealing with it for a long time, like you kind of, it's like, this is your mind's habit. It's like, I should be feeling this way, but I'm not.
Or that reminds me of guilt. Do you ever feel that about guilt? Like, I should feel guilty, but I don't. And now I feel guilty about not feeling guilty.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's kind of funny how our minds work sometimes. Like, if there's nothing there, it'll invent something.
Yeah.
Also, I remember having a lot of panic attacks in college too, especially at the start of every school year. I think because I didn't really like what I was doing, so I think it was kind of routine of okay, here we go. After the break, it's all right, we're back into this, and it was just freaking out. And then after a week, I'd be all right, it's fine. But yeah,
I remember you saying that in the other one. You said it's oh, it's that time of the year again.
Yeah. All right, so we kind of touched on I guess our experience with anxiety and what it is. But I think if we want to start, I guess to kind of overcome it or just start to reduce it, it'd be helpful to kind of have to know what our what triggers are, right? So, obviously triggers could be things kind of we mentioned previously. It could be stuff if we have stressful events, whether that's just, if it's family stuff going on, stress at work or those type of things. It could be different social situations, especially for myself, being more introverted. That was a big trigger for me. And then even our past experiences, right? So if we had some sort of traumatic experience in our past that triggered a lot of anxiety, then every time we're kind of in a similar situation, that's gonna end up coming up too. And so I think I guess kind of first step in sort of managing it is being able to identify triggers for yourself.
Yeah, I think my first relationship was the core of everything, to be honest, because obviously that was the first time I experienced going through an intense breakup, and this particular person was not a very good person.
Right.
And you know what, I shouldn't even say that, but it didn't go that well, basically. Is what I'm trying to say. And it was kind of traumatic. I felt in the time that followed. So I think that definitely contributed to like every time I was faced with a similar situation, I would kind of freak out.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it had to do with like, I think family and just like kind of the way like even my parents were in their relationship. Like there's kind of like a lot of like yelling and stuff at home. So it's like, I think even growing up, it was kind of hard to feel like, almost felt like it was kind of like walking on eggshells. Like it was kind of, I guess, hard to like kind of fully relax. And then I think, you know, what I kind of realized now, that it took me a while to realize that, like, I think when I interact with people is like, I kind of see everybody as like one of my parents, like yelling or whatever. So it's like, I think everybody's going to react in that same way. Yeah. And so that for me, I think was a big source of, you know, anxiety and, you know, having conversations with people. Cause it's like, I feel like it's almost like at some point somebody's going to start yelling at you for who knows what reason. Yeah. But yeah, that was something for me that I realized eventually.
So you have to be careful with how you react to being triggered by something. To refer again to Miss Jennifer Shannon. I don't know how, I'm not going to try and describe this picture in words, but basically there's a cycle. And it starts with a perception of threat, which leads to you having anxiety, which leads to you finding a safety strategy. So, for example, if you have social anxiety and you go to a party, but then you start to feel anxiety about being around people, so then you leave the party because you decide that this is not for me, I'm too anxious to do this. What you're telling your brain is that it was right, that the party's dangerous, you're going to die if you stay here, and you better leave now. And so you did it, and so now it's like adding another layer of confirmation of what you thought originally. Versus if you had just gone to the party, you would have realized that probably that there was nothing unsafe about the party. You might have actually ended up having a good time. Who knows? But the point is, by not even experiencing it all, you didn't give your brain a chance to overcome that fear, I think. Maybe I'm not explaining that perfectly, but I think that's kind of the idea. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a vicious cycle. So I think it's good to challenge yourself, I'll say, right, for how far you're willing to stick something out before you let anxiety take the wheel and make you bail, I think.
I would say it makes sense because it's our brain essentially kind of forming like that habit loop, that pattern. So like you said, like, okay, this is bad, I should leave. And then like you said, we leave and then that confirms it. Whereas like, you know, if we want to change it, we have to sort of break that loop. Right. Yeah. You know? And so that's where, you know, having ways to manage anxiety or to strategies you can go to like maybe even step away from it for a moment and then come back to it instead of just like leaving like the situation completely. So I kind of help you to, you know, get through it.
Yeah. What are some good ways, Matthew? Tell us. How can we manage our anxiety? What are some go-tos maybe you had?
Well, honestly, I think for probably most of the time me dealing with anxiety, I don't know if I really had good strategies, which is probably why I kept getting worse. But once I started getting into more of like the self-help and that sort of stuff, like journaling was a big thing for me. So whenever like I could, if I was feeling anxious, like I would try to just like write it out and kind of just like basically just get out of my head, you know? And like usually when you start to write it out, it's like you can kind of try to look at it more objectively, you know? Because like the anxiety in your head wants to make things seem like it's a way bigger deal than it is. And when you kind of write it out, you can kind of see, okay, like maybe like it's not that bad, right? Or sometimes I would get like anxious, overwhelmed if I feel like I have a lot of things to do, and then I would write it out and be like, it's like 3 things and it's not going to take me that long, you know? So it's like, okay, my mind's being a little dramatic here. So like, whether it's just like you have a lot to do or more like extreme situations, I think definitely journaling and just trying to get out of your head is like a good first step, at least.
Yeah. I never really journaled so much, but I did write poetry. Did you ever write poems before?
No, I don't. No, I never really wrote poetry, but it was funny because like I used to write in my journal and I would like bring it with me to like therapy, and like my therapist was like, "Oh, it's like you have like a way of writing that seems like almost like a little like rhythmical or whatever," and I was like, "Okay, I guess that's some talent I have apparently," but yeah.
I used to write poems, and I found some of them not too long ago because they're all on my phone, and it's so funny. it's like embarrassing,
Right?
But now that I'm like not there, it's really funny to read because it's like I was so dramatic about whatever. It's good. Yeah. And then some of them I was like, oh, that was kind of good.
Right.
But it's sad that it had to come from a dark place, though. And that's a lot of artists. It's like, I can't create when and that's not true, but I always felt like I had a block if I was in a good place, which is kind of sad.
Right. Yeah, I think that's why, too, probably a lot of creative people, like a lot of people who like maybe suffer or dealing with anxiety or depression or whatever, is like they kind of turn to, like you said, art, whether that's music or writing or whatever, because it's a way to, I think, to express it and not keep it inside.
It's like bittersweet, I guess, because it's like beautiful art and then so much sadness behind it. But for me, exercise helped, although I'll say it was kind of hard to get into a routine of exercising while I was depressed and anxious, because you need some kind of motivation to do that. Right. But I do remember like one time I was anxious and I was on the treadmill for like 40 minutes. I never ran that long in my life.
Right.
But something about moving, I think I mentioned this before too. I used to go on a lot of walks. Something about just moving my body helped alleviate anxiety. I just remembered I did jumping jacks at work before, because I used to work at Olive Garden. But anyway, so there's some downtime because we were just waiting for people to come in. Right. And I was anxious for whatever reason. I started doing jumping jacks in the middle of the lobby. People were like, what are you doing? It's like, I gotta move.
Yeah. I think that's a good, like, just like exercise, or just doesn't have to be like, a structured workout, just movement in general is good, because like I think when we get anxious also, like our bodies tend to like tense up, or for me sometimes I get like a tight feeling in my chest or throat or something, like, so sometimes just moving, going for a walk, or if you're someone who likes to dance, like just put on some music and just move, like it kind of helps to, I think, sort of like break up that stiffness that we have in our body. And I think, I just keep coming back to this idea of like getting out of your head. And I think, movement is one of the best ways for that. Because I also went on a lot of like walks and stuff, and, just getting some fresh air usually helps a little.
Yeah. Practicing breathing is always good to like slow your heart rate back down to normal, I guess. I've read that it's also good to make sure that you get a lot of rest at night, get a good night's sleep. And caffeine. Cut back on the caffeine, man. No, I'm a hypocrite. I drink a lot of coffee, but now at the peak of my anxiety, I stopped drinking caffeine because that was just like I was gonna have a heart attack. My heart was already going fast. Right. So now I'm in a place where I can drink. It's probably not a good thing, but I've taken advantage of my good state of mind and started drinking a lot of espresso again.
You can enjoy coffee again.
But I think, if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, definitely cut back on the coffee and well, not just coffee, but caffeine in general. I hope it's okay to talk about this. I'm only saying this because some people have asked me, like, if I recommend it or, what I was on. So I was on Lexapro, which is actually really funny how easy it was to be prescribed that. So what happened was I was having anxiety. So I went to the doctor. I told him I was very anxious. And he said, here's some Lexapro. Wow. Basically, it was little to no questions asked. And then he's like, we'll follow up in a month or two or something like that. And then I go back and he said, how are you feeling? Are you still anxious? And I said, yeah, I'm still a little anxious. And he said, okay, let me double it. So I went from 10 milligrams to 20 milligrams. And from that point on, I was on that for a while. And I will say, it did help. It helped me from bouncing off the walls, basically. So the way I kind of described it was that I was used to feeling a lot of highs and lows before it. And this kind of balanced me out. It kind of kept the heights of anxiety in check, I think. So I started to feel a little more normal, like a normal scale anxiety, instead of like, this is the worst thing ever kind of feeling. But what it didn't do is it didn't get to the root of what was happening to me, like why I was being triggered by anxiety. So it almost kind of let me tolerate it for longer. But an analogy that somebody gave me once when I was struggling with, like, do I want to take these? Do I not want to take these? Somebody said that if you're drowning and somebody throws you a floaty, take the floaty. Like, right now, like, you can't learn how to swim in this moment. But eventually, you're going to want to learn how to swim. That's probably the better option. But it's okay to take the floaty, right? You know, like, in this dangerous situation. So I think if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been in a place where I was ready to accept other forms of help.
Right.
And so I was on it, and then I went off of it because I stupidly, it's so stupid. I'm going to tell you the reason why I stopped taking it. So I was taking it because of a relationship. I was taking it because I was having doubts about a relationship and it was making me anxious. So flash forward, I wasn't in that relationship anymore. I was in a new relationship where I was much happier. And I was like, oh, that relationship was the problem. That's why I was so anxious. So then I stopped taking them. And then I started getting anxious again. And then that's when I realized it's not the external. What's going on here is much deeper than what I thought it was. And I did get back on them, and then flash forward again after I started meditating, and I started really starting to understand what was happening, like in my mind, and why I was being triggered, and actually being able to start getting rid of it. That's when I eventually did make the decision to get off of them again, because I had confidence this time around that I didn't. I wasn't relying on any external factors, basically.
Right. Like you would be okay with that.
Yeah. And going strong. It's been, I don't know how long exactly. I feel like it might be under a year, but I think we're getting close to a year, probably. And I would have done it sooner, but I had to do it the right way, because there's side effects if you're like...
Just drop it.
Yeah, you shouldn't just stop. So, yeah. And I'm pretty confident that I'll never have to take them again. So, that's my 2 cents on meds. I think... if you're in a really bad spot and you think it's going to help you survive, go for it. But I strongly encourage to still get to the source and the root of what's actually happening. And we can get into that. Yeah.
I would say, like, I personally, I didn't get to the point where I need medication. I think if I didn't start doing, like, therapy and eventually meditation, like, I probably would have ended up there. And I think, yeah, obviously there's like a stigma around like mental health and therapy and medication and stuff, but I think if you're someone who like needs it, like I think it's something that can, like you said, help get you out of the extremes, at least get you to a place where you can start working on it. Again, whether that's through like therapy or meditation. But yeah, I think just knowing that, like you said, like we eventually have to address the actual root of it, right? Like what's going on inside our minds. To be like ultimately free from it. Along the way there is nothing wrong with getting a little help from different things to get you there.
Because when I started to really understand this method, I realized that, and this is fresh in my mind because I was just editing the episode where I interviewed you, but you said something like Claire told you that in this meditation method, like, we're getting rid of the self, so you don't really need self-help books at a certain point because there's no self anymore. Like, it was the same thing with anxiety and medication in my mind, was that there was nothing anymore to be triggered, basically. Like, the less mind I have, the less mine that can be triggered. So I don't really need something to manage my anxiety because I have nothing to be anxious about anymore.
Right.
So that's why I was able to confidently walk away from it, and I knew that I wouldn't have to go back, because that's not to say I'm 100% there yet.
Right.
I still have some mine and some triggers, but I know for sure that I have the tools now to be able to handle it and to eventually break free from it. So
yeah, I mean, that's what this whole meditation is about, is really getting to the root, of our minds and stuff. So it's like medication, and even for me, I even found like therapy is like always like sort of help manage the symptoms. But it's like when you kind of get rid of the problems, then you have less symptoms. So you need less things to manage it. And when you have a tool that, that you confidently know that like it works, then you can kind of, it's something you can keep coming back to. And, over time, like it's just gotten like less and less.
Yeah. It's a blessing.
It didn't sound like a blessing.
It's a blessing. It is that.
Okay, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it all starts with, self-awareness. So it's like we said before, just like being aware of like what's triggering it and what your usual response is, and, just finding ways to break that pattern, and, kind of doing the, I guess for lack of a better word, the inner work of like kind of releasing it and letting it go. And it takes time and a lot of repetition to keep getting rid of it, and to keep, just because, if you break the pattern once, it doesn't mean it's not going to come up again, right? Like it's every time it comes up, it, takes a lot of effort, and also requires a lot of patience with yourself too, so yeah, I think being hard on yourself while trying to overcome that is not a good idea. So, it's kind of like hold yourself accountable, but also, give yourself a break too, because it takes time and it's not easy.
Yeah. It's interesting that we really, really want to know, or at least for me, maybe nobody else is like this, but like we want to understand like why is this happening, or where is it coming from? Which part of my childhood? What age was I when I formed this habit? Like, as if that's going to make it go away. And I don't know if anybody else is like that, but I was very fascinated with that for a while. And I think it was because it made me feel a little bit like, I guess, validated for why I was feeling what I was feeling. And so it was kind of like a little enlightening, like, oh, wow, that's where that came from. Okay, now I understand. But then it got to a point where I was like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care where it came from. I just want it to be gone.
Right,
like,
right. Yeah.
Like, that's great, I'm so glad that that's where it started, but like, now what? And that was something that was very frustrating to me when it came to therapy. And maybe I don't know, maybe I just didn't stick it out long enough to really find out what their plans were to help me overcome that. But I think I straight up asked him one day, like, he was like, I don't want to really say on here exactly what it was, but he was like, oh, it sounds like it probably came from this kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, I know that already. Like, because this was a new therapist. Like,
right.
So, and I was like, yeah, I know I have this and that. It's probably stemmed from this. I was like, now what? Like, how do I? And he goes, well, so you have to like start to recognize that it's not the same situation. Like when you were a kid, it was this, and this is similar, but it's not the same. So you have to like dissociate, I guess. But I was like, how? Like that, my brain understands fully what you're saying right now.
Right.
My body does not.
Right.
My nervous system does not.
Right.
So that was just like, what am I doing here? Like, why? Like, it helped me to like alleviate by talking, like alleviate some stress and like just being able to get it out and talk to somebody. And that's a good thing. But for me, I was just like, but now what? How do we move on from this? And And then I found this place. And I finally got that answer. I really didn't think there was an answer for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I thought life was just meant to suck sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're all in that same place as like, I think at the anybody who's into like the self-help or even like spirituality, is like we all understand everything, but it's the how part is usually what's missing. And I mean, same thing. This meditation is really what gave the how, which is so that was the appeal to it, right? Because like I already knew what I needed to know, and I mean that's why we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. It's the missing puzzle piece, as Claire said.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I always say it's
been looking for that piece. Many years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Comes back to what we've mentioned before: is that knowing versus becoming.
Yeah. I don't know why. I really love this quote here, but it's kind of random right now at this point. But on the kind of like going back to feeling anxiety about things, one thing that I would always feel like whether or not something was supposed to be a certain way, like I was supposed to, like, am I supposed to be in this situation? Or when it came to decision making, basically, I just couldn't make a decision ever because I was afraid of making the wrong one. And in reality, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Something I realized was you can't really do it wrong. In other words, however it unfolds is how it unfolded. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. It's like how it is, it's how it's meant to be.
Yeah. And I remember hearing this quote, and I don't know who said it, but they said, I know it was supposed to happen because it did. And I always thought that was cool. It was just acceptance for what is. And ultimately, I mean, everybody says this, but it's I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for this, that, and the other thing that happened. So I know that I have become very, very grateful for anxiety, because anxiety is a very big driving thing for me to act, because I cannot sit comfortably feeling that way. So if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be here.
Right. Yeah, I think anxiety, and sometimes when we're at our lowest points, it ends up being our motivation to kind of seek something better. And I feel like, I mean, kind of feel exactly the same way you do, where it's like if I hadn't gone through that, then, if I just, went to school, I'm like, okay, my life's happy, and I feel like, if I just felt okay, life would have been it's fine. That would have been the best it's gotten. But I feel like because I went through that and kind of started searching for answers and something to deal with what I was going through, it helped me, I think, find a deeper connection and more happiness than I would have found otherwise.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It makes me kind of think also of when you see somebody else suffering. The thing I remember hearing was don't take away somebody's opportunity to hit their own rock bottom, basically. Because it's we want to help people, which is a good thing, and obviously there's a balance, but sometimes it's okay to kind of let them figure that out, because it's going to take them hitting that for them to be oh, I got to do something different,
Right. Yeah, because we change when we want to change, not when as much as we want to help somebody, they have to want to do it. And I think letting somebody hit rock bottom doesn't mean you totally ignore them and cut them out. You still be there for them, and then when they're ready and they want help, that's then the opportunity to come in and
Is that it?
I guess that's it.
I hope you gained something from this. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Cham Chats. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave a review and follow us on social media. All of the links are in the description. And if you're interested in trying this meditation method yourself, you can visit onlinemeditationevents.com for online classes and to be connected to a center near you. Make sure you tune into our next episode, which will feature a new host, CJ, who is another fantastic helper who sat down with seasoned meditator Lynn to discuss women's health and aging. You definitely don't want to miss it. See you next time.